In a small orphanage on the outskirts of the city, there lived a young boy named Evan. Bright and cheerful, Evan had always dreamed of finding a family to call his own. Despite his hopeful nature, the years passed, and no one came forward to adopt him. Every night, he would pray silently, yearning for the warmth and love of a real family. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, a sleek black luxury car rolled up to the orphanage. The children gathered at the windows, their faces pressed against the glass, as a well-dressed couple emerged. The man and woman exuded an air of affluence and authority, their movements graceful and deliberate. They introduced themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a couple who appeared every bit the part of a powerful, successful pair. The Smiths announced that they were looking to adopt a child. After spending time with each of the children, their attention focused on Evan. His polite manners and bright smile seemed to charm them, and after a brief discussion, they decided that Evan would be the newest addition to their family. The other children watched with a mix of envy and sadness as Evan climbed into the backseat of the car, waving goodbye to the only home he had ever known. Evan was awestruck as they drove through the winding roads leading deep into a dense, shadowy forest. The towering trees soon gave way to a sprawling mansion, its imposing structure blending into the dark woods surrounding it. The house was unlike anything Evan had ever seen, filled with antique furniture, grand chandeliers, and richly adorned rooms that seemed to belong to another era. But despite the beauty of his new surroundings, an inexplicable feeling of unease began to creep over him. As the days passed, Evan noticed that the Smiths followed a strict routine. They insisted that he never venture into certain areas of the house, particularly the basement. He was also forbidden from leaving the mansion after dark. When Evan, with the curiosity typical of a child, asked why, Mr. Smith would give him a tight-lipped smile and simply say, "It's for your own good." Evan tried to push aside his growing suspicions, but the strange noises he heard at night made it impossible. The whispers, the creaking floors, and the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps in the corridors, it all felt like a living nightmare. One evening, the Smiths left the mansion for a business meeting in town, reminding Evan to stay in his room until their return. But as soon as they were gone, his curiosity got the better of him. The rules that once frightened him now seemed like a challenge. He decided to find out what lay behind the heavy, locked door that led to the basement. With his heart pounding in his chest, Evan carefully picked the lock, a skill he had learned from another orphan at the home. The door creaked open, revealing a steep staircase descending into darkness. Grabbing a flashlight, he cautiously made his way down the steps. The air grew colder with each step, and the scent of damp earth filled his nostrils. At the bottom, he found a door slightly ajar, and through the crack, he could see dim, flickering lights. He pushed it open to reveal a hidden laboratory, the walls lined with shelves of strange vials and glass containers filled with unidentifiable substances. In the center of the room stood a large cylindrical tank filled with a glowing green liquid, and suspended inside was the figure of a young boy. Motionless, eyes closed, as if in some kind of stasis. Evan's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the boy from old photographs he had seen in the orphanage. He was a child who had disappeared years ago. Just as Evan began to comprehend the horrific scene before him, he heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see Mr. Smith standing in the doorway, his face twisted into an expression of cold, calculated menace. "You shouldn't be here, Evan," Mr. Smith said, his voice devoid of warmth. He explained, with a disturbing calmness, that he and Mrs. Smith were not just ordinary people. They were part of an underground network of scientists obsessed with the concept of immortality. The boy in the tank was a former orphan they had adopted years ago, subjected to cruel and unethical experiments designed to halt the aging process and preserve life indefinitely. "They never last," Mr. Smith said with a chilling detachment. "But you might be different. You have the intelligence, the resilience. You might finally succeed where the others have failed." Realizing that he was in grave danger, Evan bolted for the door, but Mr. Smith was quicker. He grabbed Evan, pulling him back into the room, but in the struggle, Evan managed to kick over one of the chemical-filled tables. The vials shattered, and a thick, acrid smoke began to fill the air. Seizing the moment of confusion, Evan twisted free and ran. sprinting up the stairs and out of the basement. Outside, the night was pitch black, and the forest seemed more sinister than ever. Evan ran blindly into the woods, the chilling howls of the wind urging him to move faster. He could hear Mr. Smith shouting from behind, but he didn't dare look back. His feet pounded the forest floor as he stumbled over roots and underbrush, the fear of capture driving him forward. After what felt like hours, Evan finally collapsed, exhausted and lost. Just as despair began to overwhelm him, he saw a dim light flickering through the trees. Crawling toward it, he found an old man tending to a fire outside a small cabin. The man, recognizing the fear in Evan's eyes, quickly ushered him inside. Evan recounted his terrifying ordeal, and the old man's face grew grim. He revealed that the Smiths were notorious in the area, long suspected of engaging in illegal activities, though no one had ever been able to prove it. The old man contacted the authorities, and within hours, police raided the mansion. The police found the laboratory and the evidence they needed to finally bring the Smiths to justice. Mr. and Mrs. Smith were arrested and charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, illegal human experimentation, and other heinous crimes. The media covered the story extensively, and the legend of the Smith Mansion became a cautionary tale that haunted the town for years to come. Evan was returned to the orphanage, where he was welcomed back with open arms. The traumatic experience had changed him, but it also made him stronger and wiser. He realized that true family wasn't about blood or wealth, but about the people who truly cared for and protected him. The story of the Smiths became a dark legend, a reminder to all to be wary of those who seemed too perfect. As Evan continued his life with new hope, he remained determined to one day find a real, loving family, one that would cherish him for who he was.